Cara Finley jolted awake with a gasp, her heart pounding as she stared at the blaring red numbers on her alarm clock. 9:42 a.m. "Oh my God," she whispered, scrambling out of bed. "I'm late." She was supposed to be at the marketing assistant interview by 9:30, 30 minutes ago. She flew around her tiny studio like a hurricane, shoving her legs into wrinkled black slacks, pulling her curls into the world's messiest bun, and brushing her teeth while hopping into her scuffed flats. No makeup, no breakfast, just pure panic. By the time she shoved through the revolving doors of Ashford and Hart Marketing, sweat clung to the back of her neck. She looked like she'd run a marathon in a thunderstorm. The glossy receptionist at the front desk blinked at her. I'm Cara Finley," she panted. "Interview? 9:30. "I'm so sorry." Before she could finish, the woman picked up the phone, murmured something, then gestured. "Top floor, Mr. Foster Ashford will see you now." Cara's stomach dropped. Foster Ashford, the man who basically owned half of Midtown. She thought she'd be meeting with a mid-level HR manager, not the Millionaire CEO himself. Still catching her breath, she stepped into the elevator and rode it up 47 floors. Her reflection in the mirrored walls looked like a before photo in a makeover show. She groaned. The doors opened to a massive glass-walled office with floor-to-ceiling windows. A man stood with his back to her, looking out over the skyline. Tall, broad-shouldered, perfectly pressed in a dark suit. His hands were in his pockets like he owned the sky. He turned. Cara froze. Foster Ashford was younger than she expected, maybe mid-30s, with sharp features, messy dark hair, and blue eyes that looked like they could see right through her. There was something coldly magnetic about him. "You're late," he said, voice even, but his brows lifted slightly. "Very late. I know, I'm so sorry. My alarm, actually, that's not an excuse. I messed up, but I'm here and I really want this." He stared at her for a second too long, then he crossed the room slowly and sat behind his desk. "Sit," he said, gesturing. Cara dropped into the chair, trying to ignore the fact that she probably smelled like sweat and desperation. "You applied for the marketing assistant position," he said, glancing at her resume. "Yes," she nodded. "I know my experience isn't perfect, but I'm a fast learner. And why were you late?" he asked, interrupting. She blinked. "I overslept, honestly." He tilted his head. "Did you think I wouldn't notice?" "No. I just hoped I'd make a good enough impression that you'd overlook it," she admitted, cheeks burning. Foster chuckled. Actually chuckled. "That's bold." "I don't have time to lie," Cara said. "I'm broke. I live in a studio the size of a closet, and this job could change everything for me. So yeah, I messed up this morning, but I'm here now and I'm not leaving until I've convinced you I'm worth it." His mouth twitched. "You've got nerve." "And nothing to lose," she replied. Foster stood and walked to the window again, silent. "I wasn't expecting this," he said finally, turning back to her. "I read your resume, it's average, but your honesty, that's rare." Cara sat straighter. "Does that mean you'll give me a chance?" "It means I want to see what you can do. 1 week. Temporary trial, you work directly under me. If you impress me, you get the job." Her eyes widened. "I work with you, personally. You have a problem with that?" No, not at all. I just thank you. I won't let you down." He glanced at his Rolex, then back at her. "You start tomorrow, 9 sharp." She stood quickly. "I'll be early." Cara took the elevator down, her heart racing. She'd walked into that building thinking she'd blown it, and somehow she walked out with a shot. Foster Ashford watched her leave from 47 floors up. Something about her frazzled, fiery, unapologetically real stuck in his chest. He'd interviewed hundreds of candidates. None had walked in late looking like a mess and still left an impression like that. He didn't know why he gave her a chance. He had assistants who handled interviews for a reason. But when her name popped up on the schedule, he'd felt like showing up. And now he couldn't stop thinking about her eyes. The next morning, Cara arrived at 8:38 a.m. Wearing a clean blouse she borrowed from her neighbor and holding a cheap coffee she'd splurged on for good luck. She stood outside Foster's office until the clock hit 9 o'clock exactly. The door opened before she could knock. "You're early," he said, stepping aside to let her in. Told you I wouldn't mess it up again." He didn't smile, but there was a flicker of something in his expression. Amusement, interest. The day passed in a blur of emails, scheduling, creative briefs, and research. Kara kept up, asked questions, and only spilled coffee once on her own notebook. Foster was sharp, demanding, and intimidating as hell, but he didn't micromanage her. He watched, quietly. Like he was trying to figure her out. On Wednesday, he offered her a ride home. She declined. On Thursday, he asked if she wanted to grab lunch together. She said no, too nervous. On Friday, he handed her a small box. "What's this?" she asked, frowning. "You've survived 5 days in my office." That deserves something. She opened it slowly. Inside was a sleek silver pen with her name engraved on it. Her throat tightened. "This is really nice." "It's just a pen," he said, but his voice was softer than usual. "No, it's not. You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to." Their eyes met. Something shifted. The next week, they worked in sync. Kara learned fast, and Foster started letting her sit in on meetings. One afternoon, he glanced at her across the conference table, and something in his gaze made her heart stutter. That Friday, he asked her to come to dinner. "Not for business, like a date?" she asked. He looked straight at her. "Like a date," she hesitated. "Isn't that unprofessional?" "I'm the boss," he said. "I make the rules," she laughed. "That's not how it works." "It is tonight," and for some reason she said yes. That night he picked her up in a sleek black town car. She expected a fancy restaurant, but he took her to a rooftop garden above a luxury hotel, completely empty except for a table set for two under fairy lights and stars. He pulled out her chair. "This is insane," she whispered. "I'm a little insane," he said, pouring her wine. "You're also a millionaire." He looked at her. "Does that matter?" She shook her head. "No, but it explains the pen." He smiled, really smiled, and she swore her heart did a flip. They talked for hours. About her dreams, his company, the pressure of being alone at the top. He wasn't what she expected. He was warm under the surface, wounded maybe, and real. When he walked her to her door, she turned to him. "This was the best night I've had in years," she said honestly. He stepped closer. "I want to see you again," she nodded. "You will." And just like that, she was falling. Hard, Kara stepped into the quiet of her apartment, her heels clicking faintly against the worn tile floor. She leaned against the door and inhaled deeply, trying to make sense of the way her entire world had tilted over the course of one evening. It wasn't just the rooftop dinner, or the way Foster had looked at her like she wasn't just another assistant passing through his life. It was the way he'd listened, closely. Like every word she said mattered. She pressed her fingers to her lips, still tingling from the goodbye that hovered just inches from happening. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A reminder for her rent due in 4 days. Reality snapped back into place. She kicked off her shoes and rolled up her sleeves. She still had a job to prove herself in, and a future to earn, not be handed. The following week, the office moved at a different rhythm. Foster was still composed and sharp, but there was a subtle shift in the air between them. When he passed her desk, his eyes lingered a second longer. When she handed him a report, his fingers grazed hers with a slight pause. Everyone else in the office remained oblivious, but Kara felt the undercurrent like lightning in still air. Tuesday afternoon, she was in the middle of organizing a campaign calendar when Foster called her into his office. She stepped in, shutting the door behind her. "I need you for something off-site," he said, standing by the windows, his jacket slung over the back of his chair. "Where to?" she asked, straightening the hem of her blouse. "There's a charity auction tonight at the Bradford Gallery. I need someone who actually understands the branding angle behind our donation, and someone who won't bore me stiff." Kara hesitated. "You want me to come with you?" "As your assistant, as my date," he replied without turning. "If that's something you're interested in." She crossed her arms. "Are you asking me as Foster or as my boss?" He turned then, his tie loosened just slightly. "As Foster." "Who also happens to be your boss." Her lips parted in surprise, but no witty retort came. Instead, she said, "I don't exactly have a closet full of designer gowns." I wasn't expecting you to, he said, walking to his desk and pulling out a slim black envelope. There's an appointment for you at Mason Leora. They'll take care of everything, Kara blinked. You're sending me to a couture boutique. I'm investing in my evening. You've got a sharp mind and you clean up well. I want both at my side tonight. She stared at him, caught somewhere between insulted and flattered. You really know how to complicate a work week. His eyes flickered with something unreadable. You're the first complication I haven't regretted. Later that evening, Kara stood in front of the boutique mirror, stunned. The dress was a deep plum with a structure that made her look taller, stronger. The stylist had swept her curls into a clean-up dough, and the soft makeup made her eyes sharper than she'd ever seen in her reflection. When she reached the gallery, Foster was already waiting beside the entrance, speaking with someone in a tailored navy tuxedo. He turned the moment he saw her, and for a beat he didn't move. His eyes swept over her slowly, and something in his expression shifted, not admiration, but something deeper. "Warmer, you look unforgettable," he said once she reached him. "I barely recognize myself," she replied. "I do," he said quietly. The gallery buzzed with Manhattan's elite art brokers, politicians, socialites with diamond bracelets and bored expressions. Kara felt eyes on her as she moved beside Foster, but he didn't seem to notice anyone else. They paused in front of a sculpture shaped like a fractured hourglass, and Kara tilted her head. "It's about pressure," she said. "The way time splits people apart." Foster glanced at her. "You see that? It's obvious once you stop trying to be impressed and just look." He leaned in, his voice low. "You keep doing that." "Doing what?" "Surprising me." Dinner was served on a terrace overlooking the city, and Kara found herself seated between a retired senator and a gallery patron who insisted on recounting every billionaire he'd shaken hands with in the last month. Foster kept his hand resting lightly on the back of her chair, a subtle claim in a room full of polished sharks. Midway through the evening, a man approached their table, older with silver streaks in his hair and an expensive watch that caught the candlelight. "Foster," he said coolly. "Didn't know you'd bring company." Foster's jaw tightened slightly. "Kara Finley, this is Malcolm Ryland. He's one of the original investors in Ashford and Hart." Kara extended her hand. "Nice to meet you." Ryland shook it, eyes narrowing. "Assistant or something more?" "Both," Foster said without flinching. Kara felt the shift. She wasn't just a date tonight. She was a message. After Ryland walked away, she turned to Foster. "Is that going to be a problem for you?" "Not for me," he said. "But it'll rattle a few boardrooms." "You like rattling them?" "I like reminding them I don't ask permission." Later, under the soft glow of the terrace lanterns, Foster leaned toward her. "You don't belong in the background, Kara." "I'm not trying to be in the spotlight either," he studied her. "You're not just different, you're dangerous. To everything I thought I wanted." She laughed softly. "That's not the kind of thing you say to a woman you're trying to win over." "I'm not trying," he said. "You're already here." Before she could respond, a flashbulb popped from the far end of the terrace. A photographer ducked behind a column, camera still raised. Kara turned sharply. "Did someone just—" "They're always watching," Foster said. "You're not invisible anymore," she exhaled slowly. "I never was, I just wasn't worth noticing." "You've always been worth noticing," he said, his voice low and certain. They left the gallery just after midnight, the city humming around them. In the car, silence stretched comfortably between them until Foster spoke. "I meant what I said. Whatever this is between us, it's not temporary." Kara looked out the window, heart thudding in her chest. "Then we're going to have a problem." "Why?" "Because I don't know how to be part of someone else's world, not when I've spent my whole life building armor just to survive mine." Foster reached across the seat, his fingers brushing hers. "Then let's build something new." And for the first time, Kara didn't look away. Saturday morning arrived with a gray drizzle tapping against Kara's apartment window. She hadn't heard from Foster since he dropped her off after the charity event. Not a call, not even a vague calendar invite. She kept replaying his words in the car, "Let's build something new," like they were a promise. but the silence that followed made her question if she'd imagined the whole night. She pulled on her coat and stepped out for groceries, needing something ordinary to ground her again. But halfway through the cereal aisle, her phone rang. Unknown number. Kara Finley, she answered, her voice cautious. Be ready in 1 hour, Foster said. Bring an overnight bag. She stopped between two shelves, her hand frozen mid-reach for a box. What? I tried giving you space. That was a mistake, he said. I'm sending a car. You can't just, you'll understand when you see it. The line went dead. She stared at the phone like it might offer clarification. It didn't. Barely an hour later, a sleek silver car pulled up outside her building. The driver handed her a note with an address scrawled in looping, elegant handwriting and a keycard sealed in a black envelope. The drive took nearly 2 hours, winding through wooded backroads until the city fell away entirely. When the car finally stopped, Kara stepped out into the mist and stared at the sprawling estate nestled at the edge of a secluded lake. Ivy curled around stone archways, and tall glass windows reflected the gray sky like still water. Foster waited at the front steps, hands in his coat pockets, his expression unreadable. You brought me to a literal mansion in the woods, she said, hoisting her overnight bag higher on her shoulder. It's mine, he said. Has been since I was 25. I come here when I need to think. She followed him inside. The entryway was cavernous with vaulted ceilings and dark wood floors that creaked underfoot, but the air felt warm, lived in. A fire crackled in the distant hearth, and the scent of cedar hung in the air. You didn't bring me here to talk about the house, she said, setting her bag down near a leather armchair. No, he said, walking toward the sitting room. I brought you here because I can't do this halfway. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Do what? Have you in my life and treat you like some office romance, he said. I've had those, they never mattered, you do. Kara's stomach twisted. You barely know me. I know the way your mind works. I know you don't flinch when people try to intimidate you. I know you see through the noise. She stepped closer. And what if you're wrong? I'm not. I grew up on free lunch forms and secondhand shoes. My college was patched together with scholarships and night shifts. You grew up with tailored suits and vacation homes. How does that not matter to you? He turned to face her. Because none of that ever made me feel anything real. Silence fell between them, thick as the firelight flickering behind him. Foster stepped forward, his voice softer now. I didn't expect you. I planned my life like a blueprint, calculated, efficient. Then you crashed into it late, unfiltered and unapologetically honest. And suddenly I realized I was tired of precision. I wanted chaos. I wanted you. Kara didn't move. You want to escape your world and I'm convenient because I don't belong in it. You're wrong, he said. You don't just belong, you challenge it. He crossed the space between them slowly like he was waiting for her to run. She didn't. I didn't bring you here to impress you, he said. I brought you here because this is the only place I'm not performing, and I wanted you to see it. Her breath caught. Then show me, she said. The afternoon passed in quiet moments, him making coffee without help from any staff, her watching him fumble with the French press and laugh without polish. They walked the lakeside trail behind the house, and he told her about the first time he stood in front of a boardroom at 23, terrified but pretending he knew what he was doing. I was so sure I had to be flawless, he said. Turns out, people only follow you when they believe you still bleed. That night, as the rain thickened into a steady downpour, they sat on the covered porch wrapped in blankets, sharing stories she'd never told anyone. About the time she sold her textbooks back early just to afford a winter coat. About the landlord who threatened eviction while she was studying for finals. Foster didn't interrupt. He listened, brow furrowed, like each revelation struck somewhere deep. I didn't want pity, she said. I just wanted someone to see it, to see me. I see you, he said, his voice ragged. She looked at him then, and this time when his hand found hers, she didn't pull away. The next morning, Kara stood by the lake alone, watching the mist rise off the water. She heard his footsteps behind her. I have to go back, she said. There's work on Monday, I know, she turned. What happens when we're back in the office with people watching? I don't care who watches, he said, but I won't pretend you're anything less than the most important thing to me. That's a big promise. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of thick paper. What's that? She asked. He handed it to her. It was an offer letter, a promotion, Director of Brand Strategy, she read aloud. I've already seen what you're capable of, he said. This isn't a favor, it's overdue. She stared at the title, then at him. If I take this, people will talk. They'll talk louder if you don't, she folded the paper. I haven't said yes, you will, he said, because you don't take shortcuts and this isn't one. The car that drove her home was the same, but everything else had changed. She wasn't the girl who ran up 47 floors in panic anymore. She was the woman who had stood beside a millionaire and never once looked small. The elevator opened on the top floor of Ashford and Hart's headquarters with a soft chime, and Kara stepped out, her stilettos making confident clicks against the polished marble. Her ID badge now bore a new title, Director of Brand Strategy, and her office sat directly across from Foster's. Frosted glass, leather chairs, and a skyline view that stretched for miles. But it wasn't the corner office or the raise that had her heart racing that morning. It was Foster's voice from behind his closed door, raised in a way she'd never heard before. No, Malcolm. I don't give a damn if it makes the board uncomfortable. She earned that promotion. End of discussion. Kara halted in the hallway. She hadn't meant to overhear, but she couldn't move. Not yet. There was silence, then a quiet click. Foster's door opened. He didn't look surprised to see her standing there. Come in. He didn't wait for her to answer. She followed him inside, closing the door behind her. I wasn't eavesdropping, she said. I know. But I'm glad you heard. Kara crossed her arms, not out of defiance, but to keep her hands from shaking. They think you gave me this for personal reasons. They're not entirely wrong, he said, but they're not right either. You're here because you're the best person for the job. Period. I don't want to be your liability. You're not. I don't want to be your weakness either. Foster looked at her then, long and quiet. You're not my weakness, Kara. You're the reason I finally stopped pretending I don't have any. She exhaled slowly, then stepped closer. You know how this ends, right? The company, the press, the board, they all turn this into something it's not. They can try, he said. But I've already made my decision, she tilted her head. And what decision is that? Foster walked to the bookshelf behind his desk. He opened a small, hidden drawer she hadn't noticed before and pulled out a slim, velvet box. Kara's heart stopped. I was going to wait, he said, but I realized something last night. Every time I plan something perfectly, I lose the moment that matters most. He opened the box. Inside was a ring unlike anything she'd imagined. Not because it was large, it wasn't, but because it was simple, classic, and unmistakably chosen for her. I don't want to date you in secret. I don't want to pretend this is temporary. I want a life with you, not in 5 years. Not when the board is ready. Now, Kara stared at him, her throat tight. You're asking me to marry you in your office. Foster smiled, not the composed, practiced half grin he wore in public, but something real. I'm asking you to marry me where it started. Where you stormed in late, out of breath, and changed everything. She laughed, emotion catching in her voice. You're insane. I know. She looked at the ring again. I don't want a fancy wedding. Then we won't have one. I don't want to be a headline. I'll make sure you never have to be. She met his eyes. You're sure? He stepped forward, voice low. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. She took the ring from the box and held it up. Then you won't mind if I put it on myself. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. She slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Later that day, the announcement went out through the company, simple, direct, and signed by Foster himself. No exaggerated fanfare. Just a clear statement. Kara Finley, Director of Brand Strategy, and Foster Ashford, CEO, were officially engaged. There was pushback. There were whispers. But Kara showed up to every meeting 10 minutes early, shut down every challenge with facts and strategy. And by the end of the week, Even the board stopped pretending she wasn't the best thing to happen to Ashford and Hart in a decade. The following month, Foster took her to Santorini for a private ceremony on the cliffs. No press, no crowd. Just the two of them, the ocean wind, and a handwritten vow that made Kara cry for the first time in years. "I used to think love was a distraction," Foster said, holding her hands beneath the pale sky. "Then I met you and realized it was the only thing that made everything else make sense." After the ceremony, they returned to the villa, white walls, blue shutters, and a table set for two overlooking the caldera. Kara kicked off her shoes, curled her feet beneath her, and watched the sun sink below the sea. "I still don't understand how this happened," she murmured. "You overslept," he said, pouring her wine. She laughed. "And showed up looking like a disaster." "You showed up like yourself," he corrected, "and I've been falling ever since." She leaned into him, her head on his shoulder, her voice quiet. "So what now?" "Now," Foster kissed her temple. "Now we go home and build everything we never thought we could have." And together, they did. The first Monday back after the wedding, Kara stepped into the Ashford and Hart lobby with her hand tucked into Foster's. No more hiding. No more whispered rumors. The receptionist looked up, startled, then quickly looked away, pretending not to notice the diamond on Kara's left hand. Foster didn't even glance at her. His attention was on Kara alone. "Are you sure you want to come in today?" he asked, pressing the elevator button. "I'm not going to hide out in our villa every time someone raises an eyebrow," she said. "Besides, there's a board meeting this afternoon and I'm not missing it. You haven't even unpacked." "I organized a national campaign from my phone while sitting on a ferry to Thurasha," she said. "I think I can handle a few raised eyebrows." He looked at her with a quiet kind of reverence. "I married a force of nature. You married a woman who doesn't back down just because people expect her to." By the time they reached the top floor, Kara had already mentally outlined her presentation. She had no intention of being the woman in the room who'd been handed a title for love. She was going to prove again that she earned every inch of it. But when they stepped into the boardroom that afternoon, it wasn't tension that greeted them. It was silence. And then, slowly, one of the senior partners, Simone Delacroix, stood from her chair. "Before we begin," Simone said, her tone crisp, "I want to acknowledge that, while some of us raised concerns about the optics of your promotion, Kara, your recent work on the brand Unbound campaign exceeded every benchmark we anticipated." Kara glanced at Foster, but he gave nothing away. Simone continued. "The numbers are undeniable, and quite frankly, the strategy was nothing short of visionary." Kara's spine straightened. "Are you saying the board supports my role?" Simone gave a single nod. "We do, unanimously." Foster leaned back, satisfied. Kara offered nothing but a professional nod, but inside, her heart thundered. Not because she needed their validation, but because she had finally made them see her on her own terms. After the meeting, Foster caught up with her just outside the conference room. "You didn't even flinch," he said, falling into step beside her. "I was too busy calculating ROI projections in my head." He chuckled under his breath. "That's my wife." She stopped him, pulling him into the empty hallway alcove where no one could see. "I want to take some time," she said. "Not from you, from the office, a few weeks. I want to travel, not for work, just to breathe." He didn't hesitate. "Where to? I don't know yet. Somewhere I've never been, somewhere I don't have to wear heels or answer emails." "I'll arrange it." "No," she said. "I want to do it myself." His brow lifted, intrigued. "Trying to prove a point?" "No, I just want to remember who I was before all this, before you, just for a minute." Foster nodded. "I'll be here when you get back." She reached for his hand. "I know." 3 days later, she was on a train heading up the coast, her phone on silent and her laptop packed away. She stayed in small towns, wrote in a battered journal, watched sunrises through pine trees, and met strangers who didn't know her name, let alone her title. She didn't run from anything. She just stood still for the first time in years. When she returned to the city, Foster was waiting at the station, leaning against the hood of a vintage convertible she didn't recognize. "You bought a car," she asked, dropping her bag. I restored it. Took the team 6 months. I was planning to surprise you with it on our anniversary. She placed a hand on the hood. You don't even drive. I do now. She tilted her head. Why this one? It belonged to my mother's father, he said. He taught her how to drive in it. She always wanted me to keep it in the family. Kara's voice softened. You never told me that. I wanted to wait until it meant something. She opened the passenger door. Let's take the long way home. They drove through the city with the top down, the wind tangling her hair, laughter spilling between them like music. No destination, just movement. That evening, they sat on the balcony of their penthouse, not far from where she once stared up at the skyline, wondering if she'd ever matter in a world built on power and polish. Now she sat with her bare feet curled under her, her wedding ring glinting in the fading light and her head resting against her husband's shoulder. I want to start something, she said quietly. Foster looked down at her. What kind of something? A foundation, she said. For women like me. Ones who don't have the right connections or the right address, but who have talent and fire and nowhere to direct it. He nodded slowly. You already have a name in mind, she smiled. The Finley Initiative. I'll match whatever you put into it, he said. And I won't make a single speech unless you tell me to. She turned to face him fully. I don't need your money, I know, he said, but I want to give it anyway. They didn't need to say anything else. They sat in the quiet, wrapped in the kind of peace that came not from fairy tale endings, but from knowing they'd built something real. Months later, at the opening gala for the Finley Initiative, Kara stood on the stage in a sapphire dress, the lights warm on her skin, the room silent as she looked out at the crowd. I used to think power was something you had to be born into, she said. Then I realized the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to stay invisible. She glanced at Foster. He stood at the back of the room, hands clasped, his gaze steady on her. Not proud, not possessive, just present. After the speech, he joined her at the edge of the dance floor. You were brilliant, he said. Still think I clean up well? She teased. No, he said, drawing her close. You leave the whole room breathless. As the music swelled, they danced slowly, surrounded by people but entirely in their own world. No more proving, no more pretending. Just two people who had found each other in the chaos and chosen to stay. Always.